Hi, I'm Beatriz, and I'll be presenting the behind the scenes of a VR project that I developed earlier this year during an artist residency in Luxembourg. So here's how I structure this talk, and in the end we have time for some questions or commentaries. I'll start introducing myself, then we go to a project overview, the tools and platforms that I used, the process itself, virtual reality, project outcomes, and then future plans. So, about me. I am a multidisciplinary artist focused on the intersection of traditional and digital media. I recently graduated in product design, but I also studied visual arts and animation. I was born and raised in Florianópolis, which is a very small island in the south of Brazil, and I am currently based in Luxembourg. So, a few other reasons why I wanted to make this project. To give some context, at the beginning of this year, I had just graduated university and moved to Luxembourg. I was trying to find a job, very anxious, weird time, and I thought that maybe it was a good time to start drawing again, and maybe it would help me feel more like myself and reconnect with my own practice, maybe try some different mediums, and then at the very least it would help me pass this difficult time. Around the same time, I saw the open call for this artist residency, and they were saying how they prioritized the process over a finished project. And to me, that was very good, because I don't think I would be able to deal with the pressure of creating this whole project all by myself. And then I applied with this rough project idea of introducing traditional mediums within 3D digital spaces. And I also mentioned the possibility of maybe using VR, because I didn't have any experience of developing an actual VR experience. My previous job was as a 3D artist for a VR project. And then this got me interested in trying again with my own style. But up until that point, it sounded almost impossible. Yeah, and the artistic residency would give me time, space, resources, motivation, and connection, which were all things that I was craving. So, the project. I had 3 weeks at this artist residency with limited resources. And my idea was to create an immersive VR experience that blends traditional and digital techniques. Built entirely in Blender, the piece would invite viewers into a slow, emotional environment made of textures drawn by hand, objects shaped with care, and atmosphere guided by stillness. So I was really trying to express this moment that I was going through into this piece. So I'll show you a quick video of the end result of the VR, just so it's easier to follow all the steps that I did. were all the tools and materials that I used to create this project. The drawing was made with the cheapest colored pencil that you can possibly find. Some printing paper, I used A4 and A3. For 3D, I just used my laptop in Blender. And for the digital painting, I used a scanner once, but most of the time I just used my phone to take photos and a free app called Ibis Paint X to do the digital painting, also on my phone. And for the VR, I managed to rent a Meta Quest 2 headset. So the process. This pipeline that I used for this project, it takes time, but it's my time, and I love to spend doing something that brings me peace and joy, which is hand-drawn in traditional mediums. On the other hand, I wanted to share it with others, and I think VR is one of the best tools to make people feel truly immersed. And feelings were the start point and the end goal. So I will get more into the details about all those topics up there. And the goal was not to make perfect styling materials, but to bring the slowness and warmth of hand drawing into the virtual world. This process takes time, and the time becomes part of the atmosphere, inviting the viewer to slow down too. So, at the beginning of every project, I feel really overwhelmed with ideas, and I get this like a crazy adrenaline rush. And a few seconds after that, I start to have a lot of self-doubt and like crazy expectations. So this time, I wanted to try a different approach, which was to actually slow down. So instead of creating at full speed on the first days, I did a lot of observation, walks, and brief work. And I wanted to exercise being present and enjoy being there at the residency, realizing how lucky I was, and explore these feelings of gratitude. So with that in mind, the project started like kind of revealing itself to me, or at least the tone that I wanted it to have. And I wanted to create a landscape that lives between the imaginary and the real, where time moves differently there, stillness matters, and the act of observing becomes meaningful. Now I started the hand-drawn textures part. Yeah. And this was the part where I was actually putting my ideas and those feelings into paper. One of the very first things that I did was a map. And there were a few elements I knew I wanted to have, and there was a good way to see what would look good together. I like this idea of doing kind of like a treasure map with a few different types of environments, like those smaller scenes. I wanted to try different lighting and things like that. And I also did a lot of smaller studies inspired by what I saw around me, especially nature, so on those walks and the slow down part of it. And then I started being a bit more intentional with the drawings and textures that I was making. So already thinking about how they would be integrated into the 3D spaces. And when I was in a good rhythm of work, I did those were the 3 big groups of textures that I used all throughout the project. And they would be later transformed into more 3D shapes. But those were all the textures that I had. And some extra textures like for the ground, like grass textures, and for the houses. Also for the houses. Now, how did I brought the paper into the digital world? The first step was scan or photograph the paper. Yeah, there's not a lot that goes through that. You just need very good lighting and a steady hand. After that, I did a bit of editing which meant just removing the background and keeping the textures of the pencil and sometimes even the paper, because that was the only reason why would you why would you do actually on paper. If I didn't want the textures, I would just do it digitally. And then after that, you digital painting. So there's also, it was mainly a base layer color. I only used 2 of the brushes, and here's a time lapse of what I did. And I did all of this in my phone with my finger, like an insane person on the train. Yeah, it's very satisfying to watch. And here is the final the final drawings. Yeah, I decided to keep them in these groups. So I would have like fewer textures and images to work on, and it would be easier to edit them all together. Because even though I used those colors, I don't know how they would react with the lighting and the mood that I was looking for inside the scene. So it was easier to adapt if I needed to later. Yeah, I also used a lot of transparency, especially on the clouds and more the ambient textures, because I didn't want it to look like cut out paper. I wanted just to feel very immersive, almost like if it was real and not on paper or something. Am I going too fast? No? Okay. So, to bring now those digital images into Blender. Here I'll explore a bit of the modeling, texturing, lighting, and the VR aspect as well. This is the first version of the very first version that I did on the very first week. It was a blocking stage following the map that I had previously created. I reused a few of the old modelings for other personal projects that I did, like the houses. But besides that, it's just very simple objects. On the second version, I refined the map a little bit and made a first test using a drawing as an object, because up until that point I was not really sure if it was going to work. So I used this dandelion just to see if it works the way I was thinking. On the third version, I imported those new and improved textures, and I was already bending all those meshes and planes a little bit to play with the more three-dimensional look. Because in VR you have to think people can look from all angles. So if it was just one plane, you would get to a point where you would not see the model. On the fourth version, I decided to separate the map to curate the vibes a little better and those smaller scenes. I also added almost all the elements that I had drawn previously. And there are a few ways that you can add those textures as elements. So the first one is you can import the drawings as a pattern. So you can see here I did on the floor, like the ground, and also on the rocks. I tried using actual drawings to create the grass, but it just looked very like polluted, and it was not very nice, not very inviting. And the rock pattern was actually created, it was supposed to be moss on a few trees, but yeah, it was a happy accident that I, instead of putting it on the tree, put it on the rocks, and I was like, oh, that's good enough. You can also import the images as planes, and that's how I did the clouds and also the windows and doors and some elements on the houses. Yeah, I thought that was enough to show what I wanted to do without having to make a lot of work with like 3D meshes and UV unwrapping. So that was more than enough. Because I only had 3 weeks, so if I kept adding those extra steps, I would not have finished in time. And you can also import your images as an object. So I say object, but it's really just a lot of planes together that make it feel like an object. A few of them, I just like bended and pushed the mesh a little bit. And here's how I did it. So you just import images as planes, and then I cut and separated the different designs and assemble the objects in a way that they will look good together and more three-dimensional, so you can look at it would look at least okay from every angle. To a few of them, I decided to add a 3D object to the design. So in the dandelions, that was a really good way to represent the full, I don't know how to say that in English, but the cute globe around dandelions. And the materials are very basic. It's just the base color with the roughness all the way, and the alpha that is from the actual drawing, because I removed the background. And then on the settings, the blend mode is just alpha hashed, and the shadow is alpha clip, and that worked perfectly. Oh, and I also I kept the textures and objects in groups to render as collection, because as you can see, when I was preparing the drawings, I was already thinking about them as collection. So I know that all those flowers would go together, and it was just easier to render them as collection in the particle system, so I wouldn't have to manually put all those objects there, because that would be crazy. So here's the final version that you saw on the video, but without the lighting. In the end, I ended up with 7 different scenes, but they were all connected. The first one is like this small town. The second one is more like the smallest one, and it's more like a passage, almost like if you went to this real world, to this more magic imaginary. The third one is the field of dandelions. The fourth is a pine tree forest. The fifth is this dark forest magic, and there's a big spider web saying, "It's okay to stay here for a while, I'll keep watch." And I think that's a good phrase, because usually until that point people were very immersed in this thing that like you're being watched. It kind of broke the experience a little bit, but at the same time, it's okay to stay here for a while. People felt like, oh, actually I am safe, even though I am being watched, and I'm kind of alone in this. The sixth one is art music studio. Inside you can see all the drawings from this project and some other unfinished projects that I did on the walls. It's kind of like a personal museum of failed projects. And the final one, it is this lily pond forest, very peaceful with a lot of fog. And there you can see how all the map is connected. So about the lighting. it was just a lot of experimenting and asking for feedback. Usually what I do has a lot of colors, but it is a bit darker. So I was wondering if people would not feel like invited or something, but I asked for feedback and they said it was great. And after that, I started thinking about the purpose and the meaning of light and dark. So I decided to use light as a way to guide people inside the scene, or to provoke a certain feeling. So there are a lot of uses for lighting. And yeah, so here's the before and after the lighting. Now about virtual reality. To me, there's a lot of trust and vulnerability that goes into a VR experience. You have to trust people who are around you, the environment or the space that you're in, and whoever created the experience. Because with the headset on, you kind of lose your sense of time, place, and your attention completely changes. And to me, this makes the whole experience feel very intimate and personal, which is something that I love to bring with my art. I obviously had a few challenges. One of them was the technical difficulties, which my computer wasn't full powerful enough to support to render the VR in real time. And I only found out that it was not my fault after like 2 or 3 very frustrating days where I was trying and my computer just kept like shutting down. After that, they managed to find me a stronger computer. And also, one of the very first tests that I did with other people was that maybe it was their first time and they had no idea what to do. So one person, like, I gave them the headset and I said, oh, you can shoot the objects and you'll be transported to them. And then they stayed with the headset for like 15 minutes, saying like, oh, that's super cool. And then after that, I realized that they didn't shoot anything. So they just stayed like stuck in the same place for 15 minutes and thought that was it. So I decided to add those shiny stars to guide people and make it easier for them to stay on path. Because what also happened was people got like too excited and started like shooting the houses, and they would be stuck inside the house, just like, you know, when you're like in the camera view when you're too close to an object and you kind of get stuck. Or people would just like go to the moon and be terrified because there was nothing on the ground. So the stars was a good solution, a fast solution. And I don't know how many of you have tried the VR inside Blender? Okay, nice. So how it works, like you first have to download the 3D View VR Scene Inspection add-on. And then with the headset and the controllers connected to your computer, you just select Start VR Session and it should work. You will be inside your scene, and it's important to know that the view in your VR headset will be the same as your selected viewport. And the easiest way to move is that every time you shoot an object with the controller, you are transported to that place. It is also possible to use the joystick if you prefer, but it's quicker with the shooting. And here's I did kind of like a simulation of what you would see using the VR and how to move inside that. Yeah, so when you push the button on the controller, you see this blue line, and whenever you shoot, you'll be transported to that space. There are also some close-ups from your point of view. So, the project outcomes. The main outcome of this project was discovering how traditional drawing techniques could be meaningfully translated into immersive 3R environments. The result is a space that feels quiet, tactile, and human, despite being entirely virtual. Working independently with a limited budget and no technical team required me to make thoughtful and deliberate choices. And these constraints also shaped the project identity, which is a handmade, minimal world that values presence over spectacle. And the use of Blender's built-in VR tools allowed me to test scale, atmosphere, and spatial rhythm directly inside the program without exporting to an external engine. Test viewers often described feelings of calm, nostalgia, and reflection, and many reported a desire to stay longer. So in the future, I want to create new and improved textures, and I would love to explore grease pencil as well, because I know that you can draw with the VR, so directly inside the scene, and that sounds really interesting. I also want to try maybe different mediums with painting or printmaking and see what happens. I would love to collaborate with animators, sound, and people who actually know how to make a good VR experience. This one was very experimental. And I would love to do more testing and then launch or maybe exhibit in some place and even create completely new environments using this technique. And to end this presentation, I would like to say thank you. And this project reminded me that the process, both personal and collective, is something that cannot and should not ever be replaced. It's not just the final project, it's all the work, the frustration, and the connections. And I want to thank everyone who supported me during this project, and also the artists who continue to hold on to their practice, to their originality, even when things feel uncertain. That's a proof that authenticity still matters and that it's worth dedicating ourselves to slow and perfect human work. With that, I also wanted to thank the Blender team, the developers, everyone who shares their knowledge and make Blender this awesome program. And thank you for coming and watching my presentation. It means a lot to be able to share this with you. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you over the next few days. Please do not hesitate to come and talk to me if you like to exchange ideas, ask questions, or just talk.